Because my task is to bring a big picture to all of this. So I call this global governance, or better yet, the quest for power by different unelected bodies, whether it's the World Health Organization, United Nations, WEF, G20, or World Bank. So as things were developing around the world, December of 21, there was a consensus decision titled World Together. The World Health Assembly established an intergovernmental negotiating body to draft and negotiate a pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response treaty. What happened is, at the same time, they were working on the amendments to the international health regulations. So now you have these two legal documents which are trying to exert power over the nation's health response. One thing that we need to understand, they are saying that they're doing this to prevent future pandemics from happening again, or at least for us to collaborate together and respond better to them. But they're basing this on a false premise. This is their premise. The need for pandemic preparedness relies on this false premise that pandemics are common, they're very deadly, and arise through contacts with animals, and that we can anticipate them, thus prevent them. And as I stated, that's a really false premise, because pandemics don't happen that often. So under the pandemic treaty, WHO would focus on early detection and prevention of future pandemics, universal and equitable responses through One Health. One Health approach that would connect health of humans, animals, and the planet. In their own words, One Health identifies and integrates the pandemic preparedness to address the drivers of the emergence of diseases at the human-animal environment interface, including but not limited by climate change, land use change, wildlife trade, and antimicrobial resistance. Through the concept of One Health, the WHO would have control over every aspect of existence on Earth. They would not need to prioritize human health, but rather they could choose to balance human health with animal health and plant health under the guise of climate change. So why do we care about all this? Well, like Dr. Jill Malone mentioned earlier, you need to watch the media. So they talked about dengue fever, and then they talk about Nipah virus. They talk about these vaccines as a response to that. And then they talked about there is a really big one just around the corner, and we need to be prepared. So these are all strategies they're using to get us to respond to their negotiations behind the closed doors. As I was saying, the pandemic treaty is a problem in itself, but one good thing about this pandemic treaty, once adopted at the World Health Assembly in May of next year, it does need to go through the ratification process in our Senate, and it would need 2/3 of the votes. I still believe that they will not get 2/3 of senators to actually ratify the treaty. So that's one good way that we might be protected. But one of the problems is the amendments to the IHR. These international health regulations, the IHR, we have actually adopted them already. These are just the amendments. Interesting thing is there are about 300 of them, and they're being pushed by our own Health and Human Services. One of the articles of these amendments is actually Article 12. It's very important. So this article would allow Director General or regional directors to declare public health emergency or the potential for one without meeting specific criteria. These public health emergencies could then be declared without the agreement, this is the key, without the agreement of the concerned member states. And then WHO would assume management of these emergencies and issue binding directives to member states. So some of the keywords here are binding and potential for one without the country's agreement. So let's kind of break that down. Let's say there is some kind of interesting virus in Brazil. And WHO hears about it, and the way they're going to hear about it is because they're going to start monitoring all these things around the world. They're going to have a database, and then they're going to know about it. So they say, okay, we're a little bit concerned about this, and there is a regional director that goes in, or even director general of WHO, and he can say, I'm really concerned that this is public health emergency. So once that's put in place, the country itself doesn't have to agree to that. Not anymore under these amendments. And then in the past, when something happens, WHO would say, well, if this is happening, maybe use these tests. We think these medications are okay. Those were recommendations. But now, with the amendments to the IHR, these will become binding obligations, which means that Director General actually can decide what type of medications we can use, what kind of tests can we do. They can demand medical exams. They can actually issue lockdowns, border closures, quarantines, and vaccines. So some of us, I'm part of several coalitions. One of them is Sovereignty Coalition, and our website is sovereigntycoalition.org. I'm also president of Global Health Project, and this is one of the things that we speak about. Some of us feel that with these things, WHO can actually take, at least put our sovereignty in danger. And the reason why is if you control health of the country, you have resources and you have a large amount of things that you can ask people to do. And by doing that, by enforcing these lockdowns, border closures and stuff like that, you can override the structure of the nation. So some of the things that at the end of the day, I know I'm not leaving you with a very positive look at what's happening, but most people are not aware of this because we just concentrate on things that are happening at this time. Some of the things you can do is talk to your legislators in Florida and on federal level. Reach out to them and ask them, are they aware of these negotiations? What do they stand on? There are several presidential candidates who have strongly come out against WHO, and your governor as well has strongly come out against WHO. We can introduce bills in the state, House, and Senate to make sure that WHO does not have control over our health response. And we can do the same on the federal level, in the House and in the Senate, but we need to actually ask them to do that. The clock is ticking. The negotiations are going to be in May 24 in Geneva at the World Health Assembly. By every indication, both of those things are going to pass, the pandemic treaty and the amendments to the IHR. And it's up to us, the American people, to put a stop to it. Thank you.